So there's something that nowadays I see it as super commonplace in my art process. But a couple years ago, I was really ashamed to be doing it and even more ashamed to try to share it on the internet. And that's the idea of taking a plein air painting home and I guess still calling it a plein air painting. But the worst part is that it's not even just that. There's so many other little imaginary rules and imaginary stipulations that I've set on myself for making paintings. And I think a lot of artists do that. And so I just wanted to, even more broadly than just taking a painting home, I wanted to talk about all these little imaginary rules that artists set up for themselves.
So I almost feel kind of bad because we're near so much water that you would think, like, look at this. This is crazy. You would think I would go ahead and just paint the water. Let's look at this. I mean, man, look at that. Look at that. Yeah, you would think I would go ahead and paint the water. But something about this tree, like, and it's been a little bit since I've done a tree portrait, and I can't pass it up. I really can't pass it up. Um, so yeah, despite the fact that we're in a beautiful area with a bunch of water and a nice little coastline, I think I think we'll come back into that later. But today, I'm really feeling that tree right there.
When I first had the idea to make this video, the most obvious one that came to mind, the most obvious imaginary rule was this whole thing of not taking a plein air painting home. And this isn't even something that someone told me. This isn't something that I feel like I've ever even seen verbalized or written out. But I think something in my own mind kind of created this idea that when you take a painting home, it instantly becomes less impressive and less authentic and less original in a way. But I totally don't even believe that anymore. But for a long time, I would try to finish a painting on location, even if that be to the detriment of the painting itself, um, or if that be to the detriment of me, and just staying in an uncomfortable position just for the sake of finishing the painting there. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's not even something that you're going to get from people. But I think I spent a long time creating this like internal critic who is so uncharitable and like will never give you the benefit of the doubt. And so it's weird. Like this is the critic that I'm consulting for how I'm going to go about my paintings. And it's so funny that this is a thought that stuck with me for such a long time. Um, that in the early days of my videos, I would literally go to a spot, paint, finish the painting at home, and then come back the next day and act like I'm finishing it there, which is like such a crazy thing to have to do when it just makes so much more sense to just be honest and say, I'm going to go ahead and finish this painting at home because it makes sense to me. But yeah, I think maybe you guys could let me know as well. This internal critic is something that follows me even outside of art, but it definitely takes its stake while I'm painting as well. And even though this is a demon I've sort of overcome, it still shows up in a lot of different rules that I create in my head, and that I think a lot of artists create in their head. So some of them are like using other mediums to pick up slack. So sometimes I'll use like a pencil if I really can't or I don't want to risk making a line thicker than it needs to be. So sometimes a pencil is what I'll go to, or sometimes if I didn't do a tremendous job with getting a super smooth gradient, where there really needs to be one or where there really should be one, I'll pull out like color pencils, and that always gives me like a. It always makes me cringe a little bit because I feel like the internal critic is like ramping up, pulling up their sleeves, they're getting ready to say how bad of an artist I am. Um, Another thing is like using references on location. For some reason, I just even though I can consciously understand that the lighting is going to change so much and that having a reference photo is logical and helpful and a better option, something about it feels like I'm being dishonest to the whole practice itself, like when you idealize plein air painting and you make it this thing of like you're going back in time and you're having a more intentional way of making art and you're closer to nature. It kind of feels like you're being disingenuous to the whole practice when you start using references. But I use the word feel, right? It feels that way. But obviously that's not true at all. It's not true. It makes the whole process easier and more enjoyable. And ultimately, when all things come to pass, like I'm not going to be judged for whether or not I used a reference photo on my painting. There's far bigger issues at stake here. So yeah, using a reference photo is something that it still makes me feel a little bit it makes me feel a certain kind of way. Using convenience colors. For a long time, I didn't carry a purple in my palette, um, and this is because I just kind of thought purple was like a completely unnecessary color. But as you guys have seen, like I've definitely gone through my ultramarine blue saga where I use that as like the sole dark color in my paintings. But nowadays, it's like when you have that ultramarine blue and then you complement it with a violet, like oh my goodness, something different happens. Like there's a different energy when you bring in the purple, and so it's like, um, and you might even still catch me sometimes saying uh, like priding myself on how little colors I use. But at the end of the day, it's like if you find value in these tertiary or these quaternary, what's the word for like fourth level, like fourth, I don't know, but like if you find yourself using these pinks and you find yourself using peach, or if you find yourself using um an orange yellow, you know what I mean, like it really doesn't matter. Another thing that I used to be really self-conscious about, which this is video is turning into like my art self-consciousness, um is going back to the exact same location. And while I don't think it's cheating, for some reason this internal critic holds me to such a high regard that or holds me to such a low regard that it expects me to be on a different location every week, or to be traveling interstate to do all these paintings, or to be hiking up some crazy trail, um, to complete these paintings. But at the end of the day, it's like I paint because painting is the enjoyable part. I'm not painting necessarily because the view is what I'm after. It's really more the process of painting itself. And so I find myself painting a lot of the same locations and a lot of the same type of subjects, and a lot of my paintings look kind of similar. But largely, I think that's okay, and I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. I was reading a book a while back, and it was touching on like some of the reasons behind obsessive compulsive actions and obsessive compulsive tendencies. Um, and one of the kind of rationalizations it was going over was that doing these kind of obsessive compulsive rituals and things like that, A lot of it stems from feeling like there's not enough control in your own life, in your real waking life. So then, in any of these little pockets where you can kind of make like pseudo control, where you can feel like you're in control of how many times you touch this pole, or how many times you pray this prayer, or how many times you tap your foot. Like that gives you a sense of pseudo control, right? And so it makes up for the lack of control in your real life. And I kind of feel like it's a similar thing here. It's like when you feel like maybe you don't have the control over making your painting perfect like you might want it to be, or when you feel like you might not have control over how your painting turns out or how other people view your painting, you kind of make this like pseudo control where you, at the very least, you followed these really abstract rules about the moral conduct, I suppose, the ethical the ethical side of how you make a painting. Oh no, you should never use a reference photo. But if it's bad, then whatever. I can't really control that. But never use a reference photo, and never use outside, um, or never use supplies that aren't just paint. You know what I mean? I hope that idea comes across.
So the lighting has changed completely now. It's probably been like an hour, at least an hour. So I'm gonna take this painting home, put on the last little touches, and we'll call it a day.
All right, so here's the final painting, and I definitely really like how it turned out. I really think that I really kept things really succinct, and there could have been like there's a lot more stuff I could have added. That being said, in a way, it does still feel a little unfinished. I think some of that's because the sky is so translucent still, and the trees in the background are so really translucent, which I'm not used to. Sometimes, most times when I call a painting finished, just about everything has been taken to like opaque paint. But I think it's fine either way. I like how it looks. Um, but yeah, I just remember that day being super nice. I only got interrupted like one time, not even really interrupted, just someone came by. Even though it was a super secluded spot, someone still found it, and so yeah, it was really nice. If you enjoyed that video, you can like, subscribe, and leaving a comment helps as well. And if you really want a star sticker, no, you can always support my Ko-fi. That's also a good way to support me. So yeah, I appreciate you guys always, and see you guys in the next video.